welcome to a Thursday edition of the Back-to-Back Pod. I am really excited for this one. It is the Tanby, the Tom's Analytic Nerd Brigade show. Thanks, Jade, for naming that one. Griff, what do you think about that name?
I fit the Nerd Brigade, certainly. I'm not sure if it rolls off the tongue, but Jade knows better than I.
That's that voice you hear is Griff, a.k.a. David Griffin, a.k.a. the former Cavs GM, also Phoenix Suns lifer. It feels like you were there for decades, and probably felt like centuries for you. That was a wonderful time over there with the Phoenix Suns. 7 seconds or less, Steve Nash. And over there, we got Mr. Sunshine, Mr. David Thorpe. Coach, what's going on, man?
I am great. I will gladly accept being termed a nerd. I'm fine with that.
I mean, I feel like it's just who we are. We got to embrace it. I mean, if nerd today means that you're on top of shit, I'm proud.
Oh, I thought it meant like incredibly sexy and interesting.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
That's why I accept it.
We've got geeking out over shot mechanics and analytics and things that actually reveal a real story.
Yes.
Exactly. Well done, Dave. Well done.
And we're geeking out over a certain what's the weather like there, Dave? So you can brag for your 20 seconds here.
Well, I'm actually in Atlanta where I finished up with the NBA TV stint last night, and I've got some sunshine here today. It's nice. I've taken terrible weather with me everywhere I've gone, pretty much all winter, but today is nice.
Coach, now one up him right now.
I think it's. I'm wearing a sweatshirt in my office. That happens twice yearly. It's like 60 something and sunny. Oh, not in my office, outside. We've had a little cool front of here and there, but obviously I can't complain. I've worn a tank top every day for like 2 months now, so I go walk.
Is there anything between
the two when you can get? This is what you do when you can get tan.
Yeah, right.
Coach, is there
not a tank top guy, fellas.
I was going to say, is there anything between a tank top and a sweatshirt for you, Coach?
No, actually, no. I mean, when I go out in public and I'm not, walking or running or whatever, yes. But when I'm in my office, this time of year, I enjoy being able to wear a tank top, and I'm not happy. I just donned a sweatshirt, but I wanted to open up because it's so pretty outside.
Guys, let's just jump right into it. 35, 17, and 0. And 0 meaning turnovers. LeBron last night, 35 points, 17 assists, 0 turnovers in a big win over the Raptors, 132-129. The second time they played this season, and the first time the Cavs gave up 133 or 132 points. This time they gave up 129. This time they got the W. Griff, we've seen a lot from LeBron James over the years. You've been with him. A few people have studied LeBron more than you have. How good is this guy right now? And where does 17 assists, 0 turnovers against a top 5 defense rank for you? Not necessarily, I don't need a digit, a number, but how high of a performance is this in the catalog of LeBron?
Yeah, it was pretty staggering to watch. I think you did see quite a bit of evidence in their lack of defensive rotation and urgency that Toronto was playing. What was it, their 9th game in 14 nights or something? It was a team that was somewhat physically beleaguered, I think. But I think you saw more than anything else the impact that Kevin Love makes on that offense, and particularly what he does spiritually for LeBron. LeBron came into that game looking to make a statement, and he certainly did that.
Yeah, I mean, the last time they played back in January, he was playing next to Isaiah, and he had the ball in his hands for 2 fewer minutes with that lineup. I mean, LeBron James, this lineup, he had the ball in his hands for 7.5 minutes last night. In January 11th, it was 5.4. So he basically had the ball in his hands for about 125 seconds less in that first round with Isaiah Thomas and sharing the ball with him. And I think not only is it Kevin Love, but he's the best LeBron right now, where the ball is in his hands. They're looking to him to create. And he had 17 assists about the same number of passes as he did in that first game, but really they were hitting shots, and Kevin Love especially was hitting shots. I think I'm just so impressed, Coach. Just, there was a time where he had the ball on the left wing, and he was just baiting Serge Ibaka to cheat off of, I think it was J.R. Smith in the opposite corner. And he takes one, just like a stagger step towards the baseline, and Serge Ibaka takes one step over to help to shade over to LeBron's side. And as soon as he does that, LeBron does his signature cross-court pass, and he was just surgical with his passing, whether it was Kevin Love, whether it was J.R. Smith, George Hill. They shot 11 of 14 from deep off of LeBron's passes. It was something to see.
So I don't remember anymore if it's a chapter in my book or just a little piece of it, but I frequently say that high school and college players play basketball. They play the game, and pros read the game. It's a big difference. When I used to do a lot of my pre-draft training, I actually don't do that really anymore because it's like teaching the same grad school class for almost 20 straight years now. It's just too boring because they just have no idea how to play. And so you've got to teach them. And people think the kind of training that people like myself have done is, go shoot these shots and dribble like this or whatever. I've never looked at it that way. To me, everything's about context, because you're teaching the skill or the drill or the craft within the context of the game. And the idea is because at that level, you have to be able to read what's going on. And LeBron, I would guess, would rank, if we could, rank basketball brains, he would rank amongst the best of all time, maybe the best. I don't know that he isn't the best of all time in terms of reading the game and anticipating. It's a long list of the superstar players. Rarely are they just blessed athletes with size. They're reading the game too. And so at this point, however many games he's played, how many things he's studied, all the practices he's had, he's really reading the matrix in a sense. Like he sees all of it coming. And a lot of his opponents just don't read it the way he does, or they're at the disadvantage because he always knows I can get to 5-on-4. And so because of that, the game is really very easy for him.
What do you mean by that? So he's playing 5-on-4. You mean he's drawing two defenders and then can pick them apart?
Yeah, he's going to go by his guy. And so now it's 5-on-4. He's going to get an advantage. It doesn't mean he's beat his guy by feet. He's got him beat enough inches, just a little bit of a sliver of an angle where it's 5-on-4. And his body size, his power, his ability to finish almost any shot imaginable means the other team has to make a decision instantaneously on what they're going to do. Are they going to let him go finish? They can't really force him to do very much once it's 5-on-4. He's got a great left hand. You can't take away his right hand the way you might like a Tyreke Evans going right, or maybe even a Harden going left. And he can make every pass to every spot on the floor. So the other day, just a simple example of what I mean by how easy the game is. And I put this on Instagram. He was driving left wing into what I call the second box, which is the part of the paint that's like 8 feet to the free throw line. And he lost the ball. He recovered it because he's just faster and stronger than everybody in the deep right corner. And I don't remember, was it Tobias Harris at the Clippers? I don't remember who was guarding him. Did they just play the Clippers?
I don't think they did.
I thought it was Tobias Harris on him, not a small guy. And he's in the corner and he just blows by that guy from the deep corner and gets basically an uncontested layup. And he makes it look like nobody was out there. I'm telling you, there's not 10 guys in the league that from that spot on the court with a good defender on him can get an uncontested layup. And he's LeBron James. So, like I said, he's always going to beat the first guy, and then he's just going to read it, and there's nothing he can't do as a shooter or a passer. And so he's, like I was texting you before, what is it, if he's going to be the best player of all time, what has to happen? I want to talk to Dave about that. What has to happen?
Yeah, so it's interesting. listening to you talk about him, and it made me think about this. He's a basketball savant of the highest order. There's no doubt. And I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think some of the high school kids you may have coached can probably read the game at a really high level, but they can't couple that with the sheer physical advantages that he has. He's so big. He's able to act on every pass. He's so consumed with greatness that when Kyrie had a better left than he did when LeBron first came back, he became obsessed with improving his left hand. You'll see him finish far more left-hand layups now in traffic than he ever has. You'll see him make passes off the dribble with his left hand. No look sort of seeds through traffic to the opposite corner, just almost to prove that he can do it with his left hand. But he's so big, he can make the play that needs to be made over the top. He's so skilled now, he can do it with either hand at any time. And he does read the game so well, it's almost unfair in some ways. As you said, you talked about playing 5-on-4. We've actually seen LeBron, and I think last night he was able to do it as well. He's able to play 5-on-4. Tom, you mentioned standing out on the wing, on the left wing. He can do it with his eyes. He freezes Ibaka, makes him cheat in just a little bit by looking away from Kevin, and then throws the ball to Kevin in the corner. He's cheating the system to such a huge degree. It's almost comical at times. And it makes me think a lot. And I thought this when I was with him. It's very much like the second Terminator movie. When you see the new Terminator version pour himself into the helicopter and just morph into whatever he needs to be.
Yeah.
That's what this dude is at 33 years of age. He's continuing to just morph himself into whatever he needs to be great.
Which is a big recipe for that, is you figure out what you need to do. By the way, that corner play was not against Tobias Harris. It was against the guy that I think you could argue might be even longer and more athletic, Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Argue?
Yeah. He is in the deep. You can't get deeper in the corner on this play and be inbounds than LeBron was. And he goes by Giannis as if Giannis is 6 years old. Like it's ridiculous. He's just that guy. So I want to talk about what has to happen for the best player ever. But I actually have a question for David, as a GM, a guy that once ran that team. When is it too late, do you think, for that team to figure it out because of the new pieces, knowing that they've been injured? Like when I think when the deals first went down, there was time, but Love was out, and now obviously we know the injuries they have. If you're the GM right now, what are you thinking? Boy, by this date, we've got to make sure we get all guys here and on the court, or we're never going to gel in time to be able to take down, a not so tired Raptors team. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a function of time, as long as everyone's healthy and on the same page heading into the playoffs.
But how do you get to the same page?
Those practices,
that's what I mean.
I think.
How do you get to the same page?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing. Those practices right before the playoffs are always the best practices we ever had.
Okay.
And you get almost a week, and because they want the Cavs on Sunday, they're going to get a significant amount of time. If everyone's healthy, most importantly, Ty Lue, and they're ready to make that run together, I think that will help. I would much rather have a week to 10 days in advance of that in a perfect world. But LeBron is so good at making the pieces fit. If he has a healthy roster for 3 or 4 games heading into that, he's going to know how to make those pieces fit. And Ty Lue, and if it ends up being Larry Drew, they understand him well enough offensively to know what pieces to put around him to take advantage of it. My biggest concern for them is last night's game against Toronto was very much a battle of who had the ball last.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be able to get the full bandwidth of LeBron offensively with the new pieces. I'm really concerned about them figuring out how to stop anybody at key points in a game. And again, Toronto had a really bad defensive effort last night, but I think we know enough about them to believe they're a good defensive team. They're just a woeful matchup for a LeBron, Kevin Love team. because it forces both Ibaka and Valanciunas to play in space in ways that they don't like. That particular matchup is not good for Toronto. So if you're Cleveland, you need to be healthy. Ideally, you'd have 3 or 4 games prior to those playoff practices to get everybody tuned in. But again, it's just hard for me to think there's ever a time you don't bank on LeBron getting to the finals.
It's really hard because that defense is still not good. And I know that they didn't have Larry Nance, and I know that they're still working through some guys coming in and out of the lineup, but everyone's got those issues. And I don't know with Ty Lue's latest health scare, I don't know if they're going to be able to organize themselves defensively enough to get past the Toronto. I don't know. I'm not saying they will lose to Toronto in the playoffs, but I don't know defensively if they're anywhere near ready to challenge, the Houston, the Golden States. The issue is that Boston's hurting, and, we haven't seen Toronto take that next leap. But, Coach, I look at that defense. I don't know if it scares me. The Toronto defense got shredded last night in the first go around against the Cavs. Obviously, I think they scored 98 points. It was just a bad game. LeBron finished with 1 assist, and the guys shot 2 of 22 off of his passes. They just weren't hitting shots. They were hitting every shot last night. I don't know who scares me on that defense against LeBron. Obviously, you're not going to slow him down, but when they have Kevin Love at the 5 playing in space and they have Jakob Poeltl or Serge Ibaka away from the rim, LeBron just needs to get past OG, and then it's a dunk. I don't know how you play that last 3-pointer by Kevin Love, the spread pick and roll at the top with George Hill screening for LeBron. I don't know how you guard that. I don't know if Toronto has an answer for that when you have LeBron in space playing with Kevin Love at the 5. I don't know how you defend him.
Well, but look at it this way, though. Just because you get the open shot doesn't mean you're going to get 3 points, right? We know that. And the way you defend it is you kind of dictate where you want the shot to come from as best as you can, and then you let the chips fall where they may. But look at it from the bigger picture, as we're talking about here. We're not convinced Cleveland can slow them down at all either. So the question is, can we stop Toronto? Cleveland, not really if you're Toronto. It's can we stop them enough? Can we force enough missed shots, which will come sometimes just because they missed open shots, because they're not going to be able to slow us down much either. Our margin for error is greater when we score like this. And I always go back to, I'm actually a pretty simple guy when it comes to understanding the game. Hubie Brown's concept of he set screens for only one reason, to make defenders think, which I think is the single smartest nugget I've ever heard in my life as a coach. It's actually more than that beyond screens. Any action you're running basically to make defenders think. And this goes back to what I'm saying with Cleveland, why I asked David the question. I agree with what he said about can they ever figure it out defensively, because what I'm saying is they're not going to have many reps. And as I think what David said about having a week to practice is gold. I don't think the average listener even thinks about the value of that. I was lucky enough to spend some time with the team once during that week before the playoff game. And he's right. It is very, very beneficial for a team to have that kind of week, because you don't get that maybe once during the regular season at best, and typically not at all. But that does not make up for the literally hundreds of possessions every lineup should have already seen at some point going into the playoffs, which allows the coaches to build the best strategy they can and to make sure that guys have an instinctive understanding. Remember, we think of instinct as something born within us. That really isn't the case, and very often you may have once had the instinct to reach up and touch a surface that was hot, but once it burned you, that instinct was gone. We learn our instincts in anything, including basketball. And without those possessions to build those instincts, which then allow you to tweak them for postseason play. For example, a lot of defenses now are weakening every ball screen, keeping it simple, always making them go left-handed no matter what, even if it's a left-handed player like a James Harden. They'll tweak that up in the postseason. They're not going to just weak everybody. They're going to do it individually based on who they're playing and who the personnel is on both sides. So without that fundamental technique in place to begin with, those tweaks will cause problems for that defense. There will be miscommunications. They will, as Hubie says, make them think. I always say they'll think poorly. They'll choose poorly. And what I'm asking, as much as arguing, is this new group of people in Cleveland, will they have that fundamental base built in where they can then build on that like they have in previous campaigns and rally defensively to a much higher level than what we had seen during the season, which is I don't think they'll be able to, which is why I'm saying I think this will be the year LeBron goes down. As crazy as that sounds, I think Toronto has that built in. And unless, and it's fair to say, Cleveland just shoots it incredibly well from three off LeBron's passes, because he'll be the one doing the most playmaking, I think Cleveland won't beat Toronto in a playoff series.
So I think I agree, Coach, with the vast majority of what you're saying relative to when you create a trigger in an offense, you force guys to make decisions and make reads, and you won't often make the right one if you haven't done it collectively often enough. I think what's really unique about the Cleveland experience is Ty Lue takes over the defense in the playoffs. And it's already completely different once Ty Lue takes over. He's doing the defensive game plan, and he's also doing the on-court teaching of what's going on in the playoffs. So we were routinely a completely different team in the playoffs from what we were in the regular season for that reason alone.
Got it.
And it was good and bad. And the thought process was, I think it came from Doc Rivers, and the thought process was, we're going to be different, and we're going to do some things that people haven't seen. And all of the things we think are the real way to stop a team, we're not going to show them in the regular season.
Correct.
Because we don't want them to be able to game plan for it.
That's right.
So I think Cleveland will have that advantage. They've been so bad defensively at times this year. I mean, there was a point this year, they were 28th in the league in defensive rating. There were 7 teams tanking at the time. So think about that. So they were spiritually so broken and not even willing to passionately rotate at times during the season that we almost don't have a real body of work to even fall back on with this particular group of guys in terms of how good they can be defensively, because we really haven't seen them together yet. So in that sense, I think they probably have another gear, if you want to call it that, defensively, just because they have to be better than they've been. And because they'll be healthy as a collective for the first time, and because Ty will be the one handling everything directly, and I know what that looks like in terms of its improvement, I would give them a big advantage in that situation. The problem.
Sorry to cut you off here.
That I think.
I just want to know what does Ty Lue do? Take us behind the scenes. Like, what does Ty Lue do differently in the playoffs that the guys are suddenly, working on a chain?
So one of the things that he does is he actually is the one who's much more involved in the on-the-court teaching of the particular defensive set or system that they're going to run. Schematically, they're going to do things differently. They will completely tailor the defense to taking the best option their opponent has off the table. You are not going to typically beat Ty Lue's coached teams at the thing you do the best. He will scheme a way to take that away. And that gives players a confidence level on the defensive side of the ball that we are going to stop your favorite action and make you do something uncomfortable. And that's really significant. And for whatever reason, it's not something that's happened during the course of regular seasons. And this is, I started to say this, the problem is you don't build the good habits that coach is talking about by doing it this way. And I felt like when we lost the last time to Golden State, had we spent the year building the good habits and learning what we were going to need to fall back on and developing those instincts that Coach talked about, I think we would have had a better chance against Golden State had we done that. We got to Golden State and dominated the Eastern Conference doing it the way we had done it. But I think there's a limit to that. And I think when you get to Houston or Golden State, because they have the ability to create so many triggers and so many moments of doubt in a defense, if you haven't, and I think it's such a great analogy, if you haven't burned your hand on the stove often enough, you're going to fall prey to one or two of those triggers far too often. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're able to get it together defensively in time. But I do think Coach is right. There's a real risk they run now.
There's a fan on Twitter. I asked for questions before for the Torpedo question answering section of this program, and there was a question. I'm pulling it up now. I'm doing the whole Jade thing, but it was for Griff. Last night, LeBron had 17 assists and 0 turnovers. But what is it? And this is from Andrew _Danger JR Jr. I guess Andrew Jr. What statistical accomplishment were you most excited about with LeBron? Like, what in the box score would you, after the game, point to LeBron? Not like, hey, I told you could do this, or hey, I knew I was right. But what is it that you see after a game on the stat sheet where you see LeBron had his night, that this was the LeBron I really wanted to see?
You know, it's funny. I never really looked at too much of anything other than total team assists. You know, his assists are going to be a huge part of that. One thing that we really looked at often with LeBron was free throw attempts. When LeBron is really locked in and engaged in the game, he's driving to the basket, and he hasn't decided that the officials are not going to give him calls. So he stays aggressive throughout. There have been times in LeBron's career and in individual games where he just didn't feel comfortable at the line, and he would stop forcing the action. And so a high number of free throw attempts was one that I always thought was a really good sign for the team, whether he was scoring or not. It meant he was attacking and he was creating the angles that Coach talked about for other people.
Last year, I did this huge story about LeBron changing up his free throw routine. I don't know if you had noticed it at that point before it went up, but why is that? Like the only thing on the scouting report that can rattle LeBron is just the free throws, and he doesn't have the confidence to get to the line. Were you aware of how often he was changing his free throw last year?
Oh yeah, I mean we watched it and wondered all the time, like what's he doing now?
It was crazy. It was like the step back and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, he would tweak it so often that you worried like that he was in his musical headspace with it. And when he doesn't do that, when he's not making those changes, you know he's more comfortable. You know, the one thing I think you do to make him uncomfortable, and this is where I think you really are going to see the absence of Kyrie Irving really in a different light. Unless Jordan Clarkson steps up and becomes radically better than he's been since the trade, I think you're going to see people take the ball out of LeBron's hands and deny him the ball back a lot. There's not another guy that's going to get it and attack you and create a trigger. And that's a real concern I would have as the Cavs. And I think that's how you make LeBron uncomfortable, because you make him worry about getting off the ball because he may never get it back.
That's an interesting point.
Well, David says a lot of interesting things. I don't know that the typical listener would hear the brilliant comment he made about the times when LeBron makes a decision that these refs just aren't going to reward me with free throws. Having coached to some good scorers in my life, that is a process that they go through when they just feel like, well, I'm just not going to get those calls tonight, and that's going to change the way they play. You could argue, or that they should or shouldn't react that way, but it's a reality. You're not going to convince them sometimes. That's really smart. That I'm glad to hear that David talked about it, because it's a true thing that I don't think the average fan thinks about. I think it's a great point about denying LeBron, looking at the bigger picture of making him work. But think about just workload. We can all agree that he's not guarded anyone this year compared to what he's capable of doing on or off the ball. There's no doubt he'll be better in the postseason, but energy still is a finite matter. And he's going to have to work harder this year than in previous years. And so if you can continue to make him work harder by forcing him to move more to get the ball. And then a very important point, early in his career, which coincided with my own career at the NBA with ESPN. I used to always write about his lack of respect for where he was on the court. He just didn't care, for example, to get the ball in the pinch post. He just wanted to get the ball. And smart defenders knew, all right, you want to beat me all night from 28 feet? Great. Let's see how you feel in the fourth quarter in February, March, and April. And the postseason, too, of course, that matters. LeBron, of being brilliant as a thinker, began to value space on the floor, like every veteran does. Even Michael Beasley now is a monster in the pinch post. It's much better to attack from there than 65 feet away from the rim all the time. If you can get LeBron to not be able to catch the ball in those great spots where he can manage his energy because it doesn't require as much, by forcing him to go out farther, you're going to have a deleterious effect on his play, maybe just on defense, because he's not going to be able to save anything on offense. And that might be enough because he's not going to get much help defensively otherwise. So I think that lack of Kyrie, I thought Clarkson could be a very good dynamic offensive player. I still think he can be that. I haven't studied them enough I trust David on this, that he hasn't been that guy. I don't know if he'll get to be that guy this year. He's never Kyrie Irving because he lacks the second component. He only sees the rim for himself. And there's some value to that. But my guess is teams are going to be okay if Jordan Clarkson has to beat them 4 games in 7, as long as it's not LeBron doing it.
Coach, to your point, I think Bron will get the ball back because he's so big and strong. I mean, you'll often see him go arm bar and hold guys off.
No doubt.
But to your point, he is going to have to work for it. And more importantly, the shot clock's going to run down, and they won't be playing at the pace they want to play at. And he won't be playing in open space. As he's aged, the one area where I think you see any kind of drop-off in athleticism at all is in his short burst quickness. It's like dead ball stop. Where can he get in one gallop? And when he can face the rim and get ahead of steam, he just can't be guarded. But if you make him get the ball back by going arm bar and holding you off, now you've got him with a shot clock running down, and you've got him in a situation where he has to make a short space burst, and that's just not necessarily his strength. He's still going to be really good at it and better than everybody else, but he's not the full bandwidth of a LeBron if you make him do that.
Hey, Tom, so let's do this. Let's ask both you guys. Let's imagine that the Cavaliers, by in my opinion, basically a miracle, win a championship this year. Does that put LeBron now as the favorite, as the best player of all time when his career is over? Or does he still need to win more? Or if he loses this year, which is more likely, what has to happen? And let me summarize the question this way. I'm not asking you who the best player of all time has been. If we're looking at when they were at their peak, who was the best? What I'm asking is, over the course of their career, who would you say on paper has had the best career of all time? And if that answer to be LeBron, what has to be on that piece of paper?
Well, I think it has to be about longevity. I think he has to change the conversation from 6-0. He has to completely separate himself from 6-0 Michael Jordan in the finals. I mean, forget the trick we do with our brains that like we just look at the finals 6-0, but we don't look at the years that he didn't make the finals, because then we're implying that if you're Michael Jordan, you would rather lose 2 rounds earlier than lose in the finals. Whereas LeBron James is getting docked points for taking that 2007 team to the finals when they had no business going to the finals against the Spurs. Anyway, so I think you have to look at LeBron's longevity. He's 33 years old. You hear it ad nauseum. He's in his 15th season. He's already played more minutes and more games than Michael Jordan did in his entire career. He's already played. He's already got more win shares. If you want to get into the nerdy stats, he's already had more win shares than than Michael Jordan. So you're not going to win the argument based on 6-0 and his appearances in the finals. You're not going to beat Michael in that category, but you can beat him in are those counting stats where if LeBron continues to play when he's 40 years old and he's playing with his son in the NBA, it's going to be very hard It's going to be very hard to make the argument that playing at such a high level, considering where he came into the league at 18 years old, I don't know how you make that argument for Michael Jordan or whoever else when you have him playing at such a high level. He has to do it for a long, long time because that is something, guys, Michael does not have.
I think it's a really good point. I'm not convinced there's anything you're going to be able to do from a resume standpoint that's going to make this something where the LeBron detractors
are going to
don't always have but, and the Jordan passionate fans have their but. I think the thing for me, your point about longevity is a great one. He very likely ends his career as the all-time leading scorer. Look at what he's going to be able to do as a collective in points, rebounds, and assists. No one's going to rank where he ranks, and already very, very few rank where he ranks in those three things combined. But on paper, to me, that's the thing that when you look at his dominance in being prolific and being a prolific winner is really, really unparalleled. It's already unparalleled. If he doesn't play another minute, what he's done in those areas is unparalleled. So I suppose if you take another team and like this one to the finals that has been beleaguered throughout the year and the pieces changed and all of those things, all of the drama this team has had, I think they're much better than they've played. But if you take this team with all of the drama it's had and Coach Lou's situation as a backdrop now as well, if you just take it to a finals, you've put enough on there. But I love the imagery of he and Bronny playing in the league at the same time, because what's funny is
that's amazing.
LeBron will be dominant at 40 if he chooses to be, as long as the game still holds his single focus. He'll continue to evolve and pour himself into the helicopter.
I tell you that I didn't think about that ever before. I don't know how old his son is. My son does. My son follows LeBron Jr. and all that, but I can't imagine wanting to play in the NBA if your son actually is in the NBA. I told my son many times all he wants to do is run an NBA team one day when he's done hopefully playing in college. He wants to slowly start and scout and whatever he needs to do to one day do what David did and probably will do again. And I told him, please no, I cannot enjoy my retirement with my lovely wife and care about who is going to win a basketball game 82 nights a year plus the playoffs. Please don't make me go through that hell. I know LeBron loves his son, his oldest son. What Dave said just now was so good. He may not want to dominate anymore at 40 because he just wants to be a dad. At some point you just want to be a dad and enjoy that. And the fact that it might happen is so extraordinary. I had never thought of it. I'm wondering, first of all, I know that the 07 finals run is incredible, but David, weren't you running the team when your second best player in the postseason was Matthew Dellavedova?
Yeah.
I mean, how did they?
Was,
and they won a couple games against the Warriors.
Yeah, it took the Warriors to 6. And if Delly doesn't go to the hospital, and if his body hadn't completely shut down, I feel like at a minimum that the series would have gone 7.
Yeah.
But the reason I pointed out taking this team to the finals is that very thing, Coach.
Yeah.
It's 3 different teams he would have taken to the finals, very much entirely on his own back. And you can say whatever you want about the 6-0 for Jordan. I'm pretty sure Scottie Pippen was with him for those. And he didn't have to drag a group necessarily there. And LeBron has managed to do that a lot of different ways. That team that Coach just talked about, we didn't have Kyrie or Kevin for the vast majority of the playoffs.
Incredible.
And we had been an outscore you kind of team. And LeBron had been really efficient within that. And now we have nobody else. He has to want to win so badly that he expends as much energy as humanly possible on the defensive end and very inefficiently has to carry us offensively, taking shots he would never want to take. Just the expensive energy it took for him to do what he did, I have never seen anything like it. I was in the league 25 years. I never saw anything like that on a regular basis.
Well, that's the key, guys, is what you just said, is a regular basis, because I have seen it plenty of times in a game, but to do it over the course of that run is, it's just, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but close to it. And I'm not making an argument here. I love Jordan. I copied many of my individual teaching skills from studying his game. I teach permanent pivot foot almost everywhere because that's what Jordan did. But what LeBron has done, and 17 assists and no turnovers, is partly because they made a bunch of shots. It's not like every assist was great, but to be the primary ball handler in an NBA game against what normally is a very good defensive team, let's not forget that.
The number one seed in the East.
Right, number one seed in the East.
This team's going to win 60 games. Yeah.
And have no turnovers is just so, otherworldly.
He's averaged a triple-double over his last 25 games.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Think about that. Think about that. Like, he's averaging a triple-double quietly. I don't think that's known. Since late January, he's averaged 30, 10, and 10. With
Russell
this
Westbrook
group,
offset that notion.
Yeah, right.
Were you there? Were you there, Griff, when Isaiah Thomas? Were you on set when Isaiah Thomas said he'd pick LeBron over MJ?
I was not.
Oh, okay. So he was on Game Time NBA TV, and he said the other day that he'd pick LeBron over MJ. I was just wondering if you knew heading into that segment he was going to drop that bomb on everybody. Back-to-back pod listeners, I got a deal for you. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated and confusing, but there is a better way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every type of live event, whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out, or you need to find the perfect gift for your girl or your guy. SeatGeek is there to help you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats. I actually just used SeatGeek to buy tickets for my friends to see LeBron in the flesh on Wednesday here in Charlotte. It was so easy. It was like LeBron open court with a guy under the basket and then Kevin Love in the corner. Yeah, it's as easy as that. So SeatGeek is super nerdy. It's in the title, geek, and it saves time and money by searching for multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. It's color-coded. You don't have to do the math. I don't have to get out my well-worn calculator. I don't have to do all that stuff. It does the hard work for me. SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports to concerts to comedy and theater. So, all my listeners here on the Back-to-Back pod, you get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code B2B. That's B, the number 2B. Promo code B2B for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Go geek out with me. Guys, Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN reported this afternoon that the San Antonio Spurs held a players-only meeting after their win the other night, after Saturday's win over the Timberwolves. Tony Parker, running point guard on the players-only meeting to ask Kawhi Leonard, implore was the word that Woj used, to come back for the playoffs, come back to the team. However, guys, I don't know if you've seen this, but Danny Green just tweeted out at 11:37 this morning. He retweeted it and said, "Couldn't be any more incorrect, LOL." And then Jabari Young from the San Antonio Express News says that it wasn't nearly as fiery as Woj put it, or ESPN put it. and that it was a short meeting. It wasn't super tense. It was just they were talking about it and hoping that Kawhi would open up a little bit more about his status going forward. Now, Griff, we kind of talked about it outside of the show. Do you think the Spurs are getting a free pass here in terms of the headlines and how weird this situation is? Are we just, saying, whatever, it's the Spurs, everything will work out? Should we be more, I don't know, critical of this situation?
I don't even know that it's that we should be more critical. The reason I think we're giving them free pass is because it is the Spurs organization. And you have so much faith and confidence in those guys to get it together. And there was a period of time 3 weeks back, I think, where I raised the question, is it fair to ask if the Spurs even make the playoffs when this whole situation first arose with Kawhi? And I think when you look at the Spurs, you just have this foregone conclusion in your mind that they're going to be really, really good. They're going to be a tough out. They're going to be the last team anybody wants to play in the playoffs. And it doesn't seem to matter who's on the court. Well, their fourth quarter closing lineups at times this year, when Gasol was out and Rudy Gay was out and Kawhi is out, they're playing basically a G League All-Star team to close out fourth quarters. And at one point they were 38-30 with that lineup, or something ridiculous like that. In fact, it was even better than that. They were 13 or 14 games over 500 with that group closing out games. And so because it's them, you do naturally give them a free pass. And the thing for me that's really the story in this, I have no idea whether or not he's healthy. I have no idea whether or not he feels healthy. I don't know whether or not he's trying to protect his contract. I have no idea of any of those things. I do know that in the entire time that the Spurs have been the Spurs, this much of their laundry was not aired in public. And that is unique. And that is something that, to me, is a sign of things that have not been there before, that the outside noise isn't quite as ignored as it used to be, that they're not as impervious to the things that every other team deals with. And again, it's miraculous they've done what they've done for the period of time they have. But Tim Duncan not being in that locker room anymore, I think has a big role in all of this, in terms of people are rolling over on the family now and talking to the media in a way they never have before.
It's been odd to see Pop, make, the chess piece, move the chess pieces with the media in such an aggressive way. The other day, when he just basically said, yeah, he's not coming back. He's not coming back, folks. Like, even if he comes back, we're not going to bring him back. Essentially, reading between the lines was, we've gone too far at this point to change our offense and change our team to bring Kawhi Leonard back and expect the team to be, performing at a high level. This guy was an MVP candidate for the last 3 years. And think about the kind of strength in your job security you have to have if you're Pop to say, yeah, we don't really want LeBron to come back. We don't want Chris Paul to come back. We don't want James Harden to come back. Like, we just don't. I think we're good. And that was stunning to me. Was think about how strong and convicted you have to be and how much security you have to have for Greg Popovich to sit here and say openly to the media, you know what, Kawhi, if he wants to come back, it's just too late. I mean, it's an amazing situation.
I mean, does anyone really know everything? We Tom, you and I, it was speculated for a while, and I've been talking to some of my friends in the industry. I'm thinking something's much more wrong than the average person realizes. And that's, San Antonio's trying to keep it quiet, whatever, but they have an amazing track record but no one's perfect. It's, I will say this. I've had players that totally lost faith in their franchise's medical department, and deservedly so, by the way. And that changed their outlook on everything. I wonder if that's a factor,
Well, and I think in this particular situation, San Antonio's always really been at the forefront of the medical situation. They were one of the first teams to hire a director of medical science. They were one of the first teams to do a great many things that are being done now league-wide. R.C. Buford's really been visionary in that way. So I don't even know if it's specific to the medical team as much as it could be Kawhi's agent and that group trying to prove their worth in Kawhi's life at this point. It's a fascinating thing for a guy who is this quiet to be the backdrop for a story this odd, because he doesn't come out and say anything one way or the other.
Yeah.
You never hear the Kawhi's people story for very long before Kawhi came out and said what he said, which is that's absolutely not true. We've always been on the same page. So it's just unusual for it to be this franchise. And it doesn't even concern me that there would be a disconnect. It doesn't concern me that Kawhi would not feel like he's ready to go. I get that, because you've seen the Spurs in the past err on the side of caution because, as Tom says, Pop has unparalleled job security. He's always taken care of players above all else. He's always been hyper cautious with injuries. He sat Tim Duncan at times when other people absolutely would not have sat Tim Duncan.
And put
so
Manu
he
on the bench.
protects his guys. Yeah, and he protects his guys. So for him to go on the assault from a media perspective, that's unique. For the players to come out and say anything about there being an all-team meeting, that's unique. And that's where I think you see that it bleeds to some degree. It's not impervious to all the things that every other team are.
You know, I want to give two examples here that when I think about this Kawhi situation, I think of two players. Isaiah Thomas last year, and I think about Derrick Rose a few years back. How is this different than the Derrick Rose standoff with Tibbs a few years ago, or the Chicago Bulls medical staff, where the medical staff at the end of the regular season was clearing Derrick Rose to come back from his knee injury, and Derrick Rose said, "No, I'm not ready." And they had a media, leaking to the media that he was medically cleared, and Derrick Rose sat on the sidelines during the playoffs because he was not confident in his ability to play on his leg. And I don't know if there is an exact parallel here with Kawhi, but I remember how negatively we treated Derrick Rose and the Chicago Bulls staff then, and now it's happening with the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard, who have been golden in the media's eyes, almost invincible in the media's eyes. Like, who hates Kawhi Leonard? Who hates the Spurs? Well, it's like, I think it's playing over again, the Derrick Rose situation with Tibbs. And then last year, Isaiah Thomas played through an injury in the playoffs ahead of a 1 year contract year. And look at him now. And I wonder how much, I don't know if Kawhi's thinking about it or his camp is thinking about it, but I think these are interesting examples. The precedent that Isaiah Thomas set last year when he ran through a wall for the Boston Celtics ahead of his contract year. I don't know if he's getting a fourth of the money that he could have made if he was healthy. And I wonder how much those two examples should be incorporated into Kawhi's thinking, which is, should I play on this bad leg in my head? I'm not ready. To what end? The Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors are so much better than us. Should I mortgage my future for the betterment of this playoff run when I'm looking at years down the line? I mean, it's such a fascinating thing, the tug of war between winning today versus Kawhi Leonard's health going forward.
Well, what about one other thing? I want you guys to chime in on this based on just your gut feeling, because I don't know that you'll know anything. Remember Pop's story recently about how LaMarcus came to him and demanded a trade in the offseason, and Pop took him to dinner and had some wine, and ultimately he's signed an extension, and they clearly have featured him more in the offense. Does anyone else wonder that maybe that pissed Kawhi off?
I don't know.
It never even entered my mind. That's a great question, Coach. It never even entered my mind.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I'm not saying he's making up any injury, nothing like that, but all that adds in together potentially to make us wonder if maybe for one of the first times ever, a guy just wasn't really feeling the so-called Spurs way. If the Spurs way is to placate a guy complaining about not being involved very much on a team that, in my opinion, really had a shot to beat Golden State had Kawhi not gone down. I mean, you can't really argue with what they were doing in that way. To look, they were smashing the Warriors in that game, and for them to say, "Oh no, we want to pay you more and feature you more. Please stay." I just think it might have pissed him off.
It's fascinating. The question you raised, Tom, how is it any different? I think because it's the Spurs, we've always made it different. We've mitigated in favor of downplaying it or believing the organization was right or believing it would all work itself out, because for 21 years it has. And in the case of the Derrick Rose situation, we mitigated in the direction of, well, Tom Thibodeau runs these guys into the ground. Of course he has to protect himself. And in the Isaiah situation, I think Boston realizes they made a mistake. They completely overhauled their medical staff. So something came out of that was very profound. So I think you make a great point. As a player and as a player's agent, you probably do cite those precedents, whereas before those precedents had nothing to do with the Spurs and were never brought to the Spurs as a valid argument.
Yeah, I just think you're absolutely right. I think players and their agents are, with all the money that's in the pot right now, I think are much more long-term thinking than they may have used to be, and just a little bit more conservative on that front. Because I do think if the Warriors and the Houston Rockets weren't so damn good, maybe Kawhi feels a little bit differently. I wonder how much that plays into his thinking, which is like, yeah, I don't feel 100%, but like at 95%, we could win a title this year. I wonder if I don't know if it's him or his agent. He's changed agents and representation over the past year. I don't know how much that plays into it, is like the Spurs just might not be good enough to risk it.
Well, it's a valid concern, I think, if you're Kawhi. And again, I had not thought about it in terms of the precedent that had been set, and I certainly hadn't thought about it in terms of what Coach points out either, about maybe he didn't exactly feel good about the way it was sold to LaMarcus or the way the team was trending. It's fascinating. And again, these are things you just don't think of because you're talking about an organization that, like the New England Patriots, is what we hold up as the role model.
I love that, though. I love that juxtaposition, because to me, it only emphasizes or accentuates to those of us who pay close attention to this kind of stuff how incredibly golden that franchise has been. David knows this better than you and I do, Tom. There's just the list of things that can go wrong for a franchise in a particular day, week, month, or calendar year is so impossibly long. And to be able to manage it for as long as Pop has managed it, as cleanly as they have, is astonishing. And this just goes to show you that you're not going to bat 1,000. You're just, something's going to happen. The truth is, they'll probably come out just fine because their record is their record for a reason. But perfection is beyond all of us.
The irony is also not lost on me that this was the year that New England had their laundry aired in public for the first time too. Jackie McMullen's piece and the things that were talked about there relative to Tom Brady and ownership, and it's a different world now. And both of those franchises have been able to control the narrative for so long. You just almost get numb to anything that happens there. You just assume it'll go away very quickly.
From Cole Hickson on Twitter, what do you think of the changes to youth basketball, and what other changes would you make at any level to promote development? I just gave you a lob, Coach, so finish it.
Luckily, it's not a lob that requires me to jump anymore. Vince Carter said once that he was asked a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, what it's like to dunk at 39 years of age or whatever he was then. And he had an amazing answer. It wasn't the jumping that was the problem. It was the landing.
Yep.
I have a different problem when it comes to that, but this is not a problem. I read about it. I grew up actually on 8-foot baskets until I was, I want to say 13, 12. And I came from an area where we could all shoot the hell out of it. I think partly because of that. We didn't have to chuck it from so far out to be able to reach the rim, and that helped us with our mechanics. To this day, a lot of the kids I grew up with are still playing, and we're all in our 50s, and they're really good. I coach. I made that decision almost 3 decades ago. If I had extra time, I was going to coach and I was going to work players out and not play. Probably made a mistake on that. I miss it. I still dream about playing basketball. And so I think it made a difference. My big concern over what I read is who's going to be doing the teaching at the end of the day. Having 8-foot baskets is fine, but we have to teach the teachers. And I don't know that I trust that any more than I did before. That's a global issue. It's not just a local issue or an American issue. To get them to understand what's required. I just think it's beyond any one group. I know this, and I have this in my book. My goal, speaking as a dad, but also someone who's coached an awful lot of people locally, young kids, my son's age. I just always felt like my job in basketball, and I was actually more of a baseball coach because I didn't let my son play basketball until he was 10. My job was to make sure they came back the next season, which in baseball, we never stop. We have multiple seasons. I took great pride in making sure my same kids that I had in the fall came back 2 months later in the spring. And then when I started doing basketball, same idea. The bouncing ball outside my office, we have a pretty large front yard and driveway, and it spans the entire width of our house. And so I could be in my office, and I can't hear my office separate from my house. I can't hear my dog bark in the main house. I can't hear my kids in there. I can't hear a TV or phone ring. I can hear when my son's dribbling the basketball. It's the sweetest sound I've ever heard in my life as a dad for my son. And to know that he's almost 17 years old and all he wants to do is watch an NBA game, play basketball, get on YouTube and watch high school games or college games or pro games, and go play pickup and go work on his body. I've done my job for the basketball world to make sure I help someone really fall in love with this game. What happens from there is really separate from that. And until we get teachers and coaches to understand that, I don't give a fuck what size the rim is or what size the ball is or what your rules are. If you don't help young people love the game, it's not going to matter.
They took away the 3-point line, or the recommendation was until age 12. Mechanically, Griff, or just like a cultural standpoint, do you think Steph Curry was quote unquote bad for the game and that kids are now watching him and he's beloved by kids worldwide? Do you think it's had a negative impact on mechanically or just culturally that players just want to pull up from 30 feet and shoot threes all day because of Steph? They want to be like Steph. And I want to ask that because there's a great point from the Action Network's Matt Moore, who said the other day that Michael Jordan's fadeaway mid-range game might have been just as bad for us. Like, we don't think of it this way, but kids grew up trying to be like Mike and taking fadeaway mid-range jumpers, and it probably set basketball back a little bit from a cultural standpoint and skill standpoint. Is no kid has any business of trying that shot because Michael's so good at it, it's impossible to replicate. In the same way, maybe Steph Curry, I don't know. I don't coach young kids in America, but I do wonder about the cultural impact of Steph and whether we're kind of swinging the other way, which now the USAB is saying no 3-point shooting for kids until they're 12 years old, which I think that puts them at like 6th grade. Is that right?
6th or 7th grade, depends on the kid. Yeah. David, go ahead and talk, and then I'm going to answer that as well.
Well, it's interesting. So at the risk of sounding like the get off my lawn guy, I think what Coach Thorpe said is spot on. If we're not teaching the love and joy of competition first and foremost in every sport, we've got a major issue. Relative to the specifics of the mechanics, it doesn't make a shit hill of difference if they're shooting threes or not, if they're shooting them wrong from 6 feet.
Right.
And that's the thing for me that's so problematic in this. It is somewhat a U.S. thing versus some of the international countries. Like, by way of example, in Serbia, you have to be certified to coach youth basketball, which means you have to go be coached up by the coaches.
Most countries have that.
And so you have to go through a certain number of coaching clinic hours, and you need to do things a certain way. And so their youth basketball is run on much more of a template and a formula. And when you go to practices, and I've done this with our scouts over there who have sons playing basketball and daughters playing basketball, when you go watch men's or women's basketball, nobody's grab-assing from 22 feet on a small rim. That's not what happens. So I think if you're not going to be structured in the way you're teaching it, height of the rim, 3-point shot, none of those things make any difference. It's really about, can you teach kids first, what coach said is the number one thing, but can you teach kids how to read the game and to do the things they do in a mechanically sound manner? That's one reason that I think for so long the international game was pretty far advanced over ours in terms of big man development, because every kid was going through the same skill set routines from the time they were so young that their bigs still had that game. It's like Anthony Davis played point guard, so now he has that part of his game. But over there, it was a very structured approach to it. So, again, I don't care how high the rim is. I don't care if they're shooting threes or fours. It's totally irrelevant if you don't teach them the fundamental basics.
Let me add this too. Didn't they also say no zone defense?
Yes.
Okay, that's brilliant. So when I locally, my son only played 1 year of like little league basketball, and then we just started doing AAU a couple years later, because little league basketball is just typically really bad. But we did it just to see if he liked it, because he had always been just a serious baseball player. And I met, I do a lot of volunteer work at the local area, rec centers, whatever, around where I live. And I said, let's establish a rule, no zone the first month of the season. And I'll do a clinic and teach everyone what I'm going to run versus man-to-man for them. And nobody showed up to the clinic at my age group. So, of course, we killed everyone because we ran a ton of handoff action, which no one, including the NBA, can guard. I certainly knew they couldn't guard it at the young level. And then they went zone because I didn't ever go zone. I told them, we don't want to go zone because there's a number of things. But one is it requires a lot of kids to have to touch the ball. And a lot of these kids are playing rec ball they don't want to play. Their moms are making them, which is fine. But they're not going to continue to play when you keep throwing the ball and they drop it and the rest of the team gets mad. So we're just forcing kids out, and the games are going to be 6-4, and that's no fun either. And you also lose the incentive to beat your first guy off the dribble because there's another zone defender waiting for you, whereas if it's man-to-man, you can spread them out and have some angles. So it's actually hurting your ball handling ability. So unfortunately, the coaches weren't caring about anything but trying to beat me, which was not the point. And my team did go undefeated, I will say. But I took no great happiness. It was a long time ago. I ended up I tried to help all the other coaches understand what was really going on and what our goals should be, which is make sure these kids keep coming back. And I think all but a couple of my kids, this is 7 years ago now, they're still playing high school basketball. Most of them are JV, 9th and 10th graders. That's fine. They're still playing. So I like that rule, no zones. I think it's great. You're kidding yourself if you think these kids are going to stop shooting threes, and thank goodness for that, because and we get a third point, by the way, which I love to remind people all the time for that. The Steph Curry the revolution, which I wholeheartedly embrace. I kind of call it Trae Young now a lot because all these high school kids are loving Trae Young. So we practice the 25-foot dribble three. I never used to practice that. I'm so glad Steph Curry showed that I was wrong. But as much as my imagination has been good, it needed to be better. And he helped me imagine better. So we practice 30-foot catch and shoot. Sometimes just to work on our form, because if I can get my son's 162 pounds, he can shoot 30-foot, no problem. He doesn't always make it, but he can reach the rim, no problem. And that means his form is good. He's loading his legs. He's got a good follow through. He's got good balance. So we'll do that. But in games, I'll let my guys shoot 24, 25 footers. And I really like when a new guy joins our team and one of my veteran guys who's been around me before will say, you can take that shot. Coach will let you. I love that because I want to free them up. That's all Steph. And by the way, it's fun. And so that goes back to what I said before. If I'm in charge of USA basketball, which I'm not and never will be, but if I was, that would be step one. Whatever rules we put into place, and yes, I do believe in coaching certification. And rule number one for all those coaches will be, how often are your guys smiling? Do they love to compete? I have a picture, I'm sure it's on Facebook somewhere, where when we won our championship game when they were 10. And remember, I've won 4 AAU national championships. So I've coached some really good players at a high level just at the prep division. But my favorite memory is that little group of 9 and 10-year-olds, because the picture after the game, the kids were soaked with sweat, red-faced, and they're 9 and 10 years old. And they just competed their butt off. And that's the idea. Is they love to compete. It is a competition. It's not an exhibition. That's why I don't watch All-Star games. Even at the high school level, I had kids playing the All-Star game recently down here. The high school team I help. I didn't go. I go to games that count. I care about the ones that count. It's a competitive game. And if you don't love it, you're not going to be very good at it, with some exceptions if you're 7 feet tall. So these rules I worry about because I don't think they're going to necessarily help us teach the game mechanically. But more importantly, I worry that it's going to inhibit the joy of the game. And that's how we get people to come in the first place.
Tom, when you first mentioned the Steph Curry revolution and has he actually been bad for the game, I immediately had a vision of a couple different photos that I've seen of Steph and of CJ McCollum when they were so much tinier than the guys they were playing against in high school. And they were able to overcome and find their greatness because their skill set was so advanced and their shooting range was so advanced. So I think to a huge degree, Steph and CJ have made it possible for a whole generation of kids to dream that wouldn't have otherwise dreamed that when they're that small, they can be skilled enough to overcome it. So I think to a huge degree, it's contributed to an enormous wave of skills development that wouldn't have been there before. So that image of CJ, and you can see it on Twitter all the time, of him looking like he's in a crouch and everyone's just so much bigger than he is.
Yep.
To think about him dominating NBA games now is awesome. And then the other image that I'm really struck with is, Coach winning 4 AAU championships with really high-level players and then flexing. I know he's flexing in a tank top, and there's just something sexy about that.
No. And most of the time, I don't even take pictures with the guys when they win. It's their team.
Yeah. I mean,
you're not going to see many pictures, and typically, I'm just a volunteer now. I'll do a lot of the practices and whatever, but at my age, I'm trying to help coaches understand their role as a coach in inspiring our players. I don't understand. Did you guys watch the NCAA tournament at all?
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you'll remember, Dave will, because he was in the NBA when Kelvin Sampson was at Oklahoma. And I thought they ran garbage offense, played really hard, defended, but I thought they ran really bad offenses when he was there. I don't really remember him in Indiana. He wasn't there long. And then I watched Houston play. He's at the University of Houston. And they run gorgeous NBA sets every time down. And I thought, all right, that's what I'm talking about. That guy has expanded his knowledge base, helped to be in the NBA and coach guys like Harden or whatever. But he's a better coach for it. His players, he's got that kid Gray that's really going to improved in part, I'm sure, because of what they're running. I wish more high school coaches would take the time to watch the world's best athletes play the world's best level of basketball and realize that it may look easy because we have talents like LeBron, but they're running great stuff. They're running great stuff internationally too. I watch international stuff all the time. The NBA guys are just fine copying from Europe. Just look at Spain action. Every team is running Spain action now, and they got that from, you guessed it, Spain. The best coaches, the best copycat guys. I wish our younger coaches would be the same.
I remember in
eighth grade. I think, sorry, Tom, I think what you said, Coach, about Kelvin Sampson's a really good thing, and more coaches need to apply this. Kelvin came to the NBA with an intellectual curiosity, and he grew and evolved, and he kept getting better. So he went back to college with all of that information. A lot of guys never grow and evolve as coaches at all. They stay so dogmatic and dug in on what they do that they don't have the ability to get better.
I was thinking of the image of Michael Jordan when he hit the shot against Utah. My eighth grade coach brought it to practice the next day, the newspaper printout of his form, his mechanics with his elbow on that shot where he just left it up there.
He held it, yeah.
He held it, and the coach brought it into my eighth grade practice, and he just showed us, like, man, after all he's done, after all the championships, after the grind of the season, the last game, the last minute, the last moment, it's just, look at that form. I mean, and it was just, an example of how even when you're Michael Jordan, it all comes down to that. It's just focusing on the little details and focusing on form. And it was like, it was motivating. You had as an 8th grader watching Michael Jordan at that time, it was cool to like then go work on that skill. And for the same guys who are watching Trae Young or watching Steph Curry, pulling up from 30 is really hard. It takes a lot of skill to put the ball in the basket from 30 feet away. And I feel like we're, of all the things in the USAB guidelines, I'm really happy about the shot clock that they put in for I think middle schoolers and high schoolers. They say 24 seconds in high school. I just think that's a little too low from going 0 shot clock to 24 seconds. I think it's a little much, but the getting rid of the 3-point shot, I mean, pulling up from deep is a skill, and I think we should be encouraging it. So, guys, we got to wrap. Enjoy the 4 seasons. Enjoy the set. Enjoy Atlanta weather. Be glad that you're not in New York right now because it's, another nor'easter for the Northeast. Enjoy yourself this weekend, everybody. Thanks to Griff. Thanks to Coach. Flex on him, Coach. I want to see some more Instagram. You should have a Patreon just for your Instagram account flexing. So thanks so much for joining us, and Jade, thanks for recording.
Thanks, guys.
Tom,
have a good one.
I'm doing the Sweet 16 today. Eat your heart out, baby.
Oh man, enjoy that. Who do you like? Is there anyone you're watching?
The Atlanta games has Kentucky in the fold, so that's going to be a lot of fun to get to see. That team has really grown and evolved positively over the course of the year, and it seems like Cal finds a way to make those guys play the right way.
I know. I remember, what was it, Julius Randle when they won it all, right? With like an 8 seed, or they went to the championship with an 8 seed, right? With Julius Randle, is that right?
Yeah, went to the championship game, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy that, and hopefully we'll see each other soon, but thanks so much for having the time out of your day, and enjoy the 4 seasons, Coach. Griff.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.